All right, what's up, y'all? A lot of people have been asking for my story, or somebody to interview me. So this is gonna be the first part. I'm gonna break it up into a couple different parts. And it is what it is. You know, it's a little awkward having somebody else interview me, even though I'm open with my life, but it is a little awkward. So I had Frank interview me. He knows, we know each other since we was kids, but I also feel like he's going to ask certain questions that maybe other people aren't going to ask. And I also felt that I needed somebody to interview me that knows enough about me, but doesn't know everything. So they still know the questions to ask. And also in the comment section of this video, if there's stuff specifically you want to know, drop it in that comment section. And I'll answer it to the best of my ability. I thank you guys also. The channel's been growing like crazy. I thank you guys for the support, for the shares, for the views, everything. I thank it all. I even thank y'all motherfuckers that be trolling on the channel. I thank you. So let's get started with the interview.
Let's just start off with where were you born, the generic stuff in the first couple years.
Yep. I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1980. I don't know what hospital I was born in. I don't know, to be honest.
You don't know what hospital, yo?
I don't know. My sister just put it in a DM to me. She seen what I said this like on Instagram or something, where I don't even know what hospital I was born in. And I don't really have nobody to ask but my sister. And she mentioned it. I think she said Brooklyn Hospital. I'm not 100% positive. If you used to ask me today, we'll give you $1 million if you could correctly name the hospital you're born in. I wouldn't be able to win the money. So I was born in Brooklyn Hospital in 1980, September 19th, 1980. I know I was almost born in the back of a taxi. I know that. My mom, she shared that story with me when she went into labor. We were at my grandmother's house and we didn't have a car, so they called the taxi cab, and I was almost born in the back of a taxi, but fortunately I made it to the hospital on time. I was born, my mother's name is Maritza, my father's name is Frank. I don't think they were married when I was born. They got married later on, but my parents, both of them was addicts. My mother and my father were both heroin addicts. My father was also a cocaine addict too.
At the time you were born, that was what they were struggling?
Yeah, at the time I was born, but my father was in the streets heavy.
Yeah.
My father, that's a whole nother video I'll make about that, but my father was in the streets heavy, so there was times when we were young. I remember one specifically that somebody was coming to kick the door in. They was doing a home invasion at our house in South 2nd, and we used to live in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, and somebody was doing a home invasion to our house. They was trying to kick in the front door, and we left out through the fire escape, through the window. Ooh. Through the fire escape. Me, Shireen, and my mom. We left out through the fire escape. No, he wasn't there. And then the person ended up breaking into the house, and we're on the fire escape, and we're trying to bang. I remember they, like trying to bang on windows so somebody could let us in. But at the time, it's different than it is now. Now you can't do that shit. Somebody's calling the cops right away, all that shit. But at the time, nobody wanted to let us in because they knew it was some drama. It was like, mind your own business, don't answer. And the person came out to the fire escape and started shooting at us while we're going up the fire escape. And then thankfully somebody ended up letting us in to their apartment through the window. Anybody that doesn't know, New York got fire escapes. That's how you get out of the building if a fire happens. So the fire escape, you could either take it down or you could take it up. We took it up. It was me, my sister, my mom. I was a child. My sister was a child. My mom was young. So that just goes to tell you what type of situation we grew up in. My father, like I said, he was heavy in the streets. He was paralyzed when I was young from getting shot up, from being in the streets. So there was always some bullshit going on. My parents couldn't take care of us, me and my older sister, because of their addiction and life in the street. So my grandmother, we ended up living with my grandmother and my grandfather. And
how were you?
I was young, probably fucking 2 years old. I was a child.
Oh, it was before. It was like just when you were starting to remember shit.
Exactly. Yep. we was young, and my grandmother and my grandfather, they were pastors. So going over there was completely different. I remember they tell me stories of how, mind you, I was a little kid, but I grew up in the streets. It wasn't like little kids now, you stay in the house. We grew up in the streets, so I was constantly cursing at everybody. I was real disrespectful. I remember like my grandmother, when I went to move with her, she was older. So her friends, they'd be like, oh, you're so cute. And they tell me story. I used to be like, man, fuck you, you old bitch, and all that type of stuff. Because that's what I grew up around. So yeah, I was real loose with my mouth and crazy.
How long you stood with them?
I stood with my grandmother for a couple years. I don't know exactly how long, mind you, because I'm young. I was young at the time, but I don't know, maybe 3 years I stood with my grandmother. And for me, everything was dope there, because my grandmother, she was well off, you know what I mean? She had money, and maybe just what I think was money. Maybe she just had normal people, and my mom and my dad didn't. Maybe she was just living by means, but my mom and my dad didn't have money, so it was different. But I remember I loved it there. My grandmother, she was awesome. She was like my second mom all the way growing up, all through adulthood and stuff. And it was awesome. My grandfather, he was cool at the time. And I just remembered I felt extremely loved and cared. That was like real good memories. My grandmother used to take us different places, upstate New York, Poughkeepsie, take us to do different stuff that I didn't never get to experience before.
So you left them, and then you got to remember leaving them and going with your mom, I guess. Back.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember the specific situation, but I remember, I guess my mom and my dad, they went to programs, to Teen Challenge in Massachusetts, and ended up getting themselves together, I guess. And then we went back to live with them.
They did together as a couple?
No, separate. It was a men's and it was a woman's. It was like they were like,
both went to Massachusetts, so they both were serious about it. Let's go,
I think my mom went to upstate New York and my dad went to Massachusetts. I know my dad went to Teen Challenge. Yep. Yeah. To get their lives together. They're drug rehabs, but they're also like Christian, church stuff based. Yeah, exactly. So I don't remember the exact, what it was like, but I'm pretty sure I didn't want to leave my grandmother, because my grandmother was.
I can imagine if she had a little bit of money.
Exactly, and she was the world to me. You know what I mean? So, but we ended up leaving my grandmother, and then I remember we used to, if I'm correct, a lot of my childhood is sort of hazy, that I don't really remember too much, but I think we went to live with my grandmother from my mother's side, and we were living there, because I have childhood memories of being there with my mother. Yeah, in Brooklyn also. My grandmother, my dad's mom, the one we went to live with, that was the pastor, she lived in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And my grandmother from my mother's side, she lived in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, in the South Side, and that's where we lived at.
So you just grew up in New York to how old?
Grew up in New York. We came out here, I was probably like 7 years old, to Pennsylvania, 7, 8 years old. I was young, I was a child.
Through Teen Challenge.
Through Teen Challenge. We ended up, because they had a campus out here behind Sunbury, Pennsylvania. That's where I moved to, Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I don't really remember too much like when I first moved out here. I know I didn't like it though, because there wasn't a lot of Spanish people out here at the time. And we came out here, we moved to, it was like housing projects called the Acres. That's where me and him met at also.
Well, I came to a couple years later. I came when I was 9.
And that's
Your dad
where
came
we
out
moved.
Here at the same time?
My dad came out here. Yeah, my dad and my mom, Shireen. Yep, me and my older sister Shireen. Chantel wasn't born yet. Right. Chantel was born like right after we moved here, which is Chantel is my younger sister.
Well, I don't remember your dad in the Acres, and I came a couple years later. So.
Yeah, exactly. They split up quickly. My dad, when he came out here, I remember my dad and, I'm not even going to get into, his friends. What they would do is when they came out here, they seen a hole in the system. In Pennsylvania, it's really easy to get guns. You could go to the store and buy guns. Everybody has guns. So what they would do is buy guns and take them back to Brooklyn. They cut the guns down, and he started selling drugs out here, you know, as a very young child. I remember a couple times the police raided my house. I remember I was probably 7, 8 years old. It wasn't long after we moved out here where I remember I heard banging and you know, and back in the day, like a megaphone, and it was the cops. And I looked out my window, and my window faced the front of the house. And there was a big parking lot in front of my house. And I remember that shit being flooded with cops. They were like over their cars with shotguns and shit, you know what I mean? And I was like, what the fuck is going on? I opened the window and closed that bitch and went right back to sleep. Like I just thought I was dreaming or something. And then I come to find out that, you know, it was real. So that's the type of household, you know, I grew up in. One instance, him and another family member they were shaving down a shotgun. And the shotgun was loaded. And I was in the room with them, you know, watching them, and the shotgun goes off. And I was standing right next to the dresser. It blew up the dresser. I was standing right next to it. Wood, splinters, all that shit went all over me. And I just remember my mom coming in the room and screaming like a motherfucker.
Right.
Yeah, that it was literally, you know, and a kid at that age, you get hit with a shotgun standing right, you're done. You're in trouble.
Yeah,
so
anybody,
you know,
anybody.
Yeah, so that just goes to tell you like what type of environment, a home environment, you know what I mean, that I grew up in. It was highly dysfunctional. A lot of domestic abuse. It was, you know, I see my mom running around with black eyes and a neck brace on a normal basis. And I thought that stuff happened in every home. My father was very, very physically abusive to my mother, also to me. He didn't put his hands on my sister at all. My sister has a different father. So he didn't put his hands on her, but he would put his hands on me, and then my mom would try to intervene, and then that's when he put his hands on my mom. You know?
Before you get into like Pennsylvania life, like what was your favorite childhood memory from New York? You lived in a couple different places. You know what I mean?
My grandmother,
like
stuff with my grandmother. I remember going to Poughkeepsie, New York, in upstate New York. She would take us there to Lake Champlain also when we were young, and we used to it was in the woods, like it was like a campground. Me, my grandmother, maybe like my cousins in the church, you know what I mean? And we used to jump like leaf piles and stuff, and that shit was fun. I thought it was dope. Also, my grandmother, they were well off, like I said. They owned buildings, a whole bunch of buildings in New York. So I remember I used to go with my grandfather, like looking through the buildings, like I felt like an explorer, you know what I mean? And buildings are big in New York. For those of you that never been to New York, buildings are big. You know, there's a couple hundred people that live there. So imagine what downstairs looks like, the boiler room and the storage rooms. Those are probably some of my earliest childhood memories that are my favorite, like spending time with my grandmother. You know, that was my favorite childhood memory. It was, I felt love. There was no chaos in that house whatsoever. There was no raising voices. There was no cursing. She's the one that introduced me to God, you know, for the first time probably, all that type of stuff. So it was just a normal place to live, you know.
So when you came down to Pennsylvania, how was the Pennsylvania life like?
I remember I didn't like it. I was different than everybody else.
Third grade, you came?
Yeah, it was young.
Grade?
I don't even remember, but I was young. I was a little kid, you know what I mean? And I just remember I was younger than everybody else. I mean, that I was different than everybody else. I was Puerto Rican. Everybody was white. Like I look at early class photos, and I'm the only one that doesn't look like me in the photos. So that led to kids, you know, when I was younger, I had to deal with bullying. I used to get bullied because of that, you know what I mean? I used to get made fun of because we didn't have money. So when I used to face that type of stuff, I used to end up putting my hands on people, and that's sort of where I was like, all right, you know. And I also remember too, when I was young, going to New York, where my father would like put me to fight people on the block. I remember that. There was always like badass kids on the block that are bad in your neighborhood. And my father used to be like, go get him. You know what I mean? So I remember that. And I thought that shit was so cool. And his friends would be like, yeah, we're going to get little Frankie to fuck you up. And I thought that shit, I used to think I was cool. And all his friends would be like, yeah, you know, all that type of stuff. But as I got older, I was like, damn, that was like a fucking dog. You know what I mean? Like, I would never tell my kid, go fuck him up. You know what I mean? Like, go, you know, and that's what he used to do. But, you know, I learned at a young age that when people would make fun of me and stuff, that I would sort of fight, and
That's
then
the way you solve the shit.
yeah, that's the way I learned
Easiest way
as
to
a
solve
young
a
kid.
problem.
Yeah, to solve a problem was through violence, and
Well,
know.
damn, I was gonna wait a little bit, but you said about the shotgun at an early age. So when was like your first time you like realized there was a thing like drugs? When was the first time you knew that there was something like drugs?
I used to listen in my house, and also when we lived with my grandmother, my mom's mom. Everybody on the house was strung out on drugs. My uncles, my aunts, everybody. So you walk in the house and everybody's nodding off. You know, my grandmother's smoking a joint over here. You know, so that's the way it was. And I thought that stuff went on in everybody's house until I got a little older. I used to see everybody nodding off, and I used to be like, oh, they're tired. You know, so it was very, very early on that was my interactions with drugs, and, you know, seeing people nodding off and stuff like that.
What was your first interaction?
Personally, using or anything like
the
that?
first time, I guess you would say holding drugs in your hand. So
Oh,
any type
young-
of drugs, you know what I mean?
young
What do you do
age.
with them?
Yeah,
Like,
young age. I would find drugs around the house. I'd find bags and stuff like that, and I'd sometimes I didn't know what it was. Like, for anybody that sees drugs when they're a kid, you don't know what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know what it is. So I would see that type of stuff. You'd see paraphernalia around the house, you know, on a normal basis. So it was very, very early on, you know, like talking like grade school, early grade school, when
that you just seen it. And when was the first time you just had it? That you took it? Or you went to go do something with it? Or you went to go use it?
the first time I ever like took drugs,
Like
my
bad
first
motives. I guess I would say bad motives towards the drugs. You know what I mean?
one time,
Not just as
yeah.
an innocent kid walking by and seeing it. Like,
Yep.
when did you start seeing?
One time I was probably, I don't know, maybe like 6th grade.
Which is 10 years old, 11 years old.
Yeah, 11 years old, where I put on my mom's coat, and I thought it was my coat, and I put on her coat, and because we had the same coat. My mom, she used to be a booster. She used to steal. So that's how she used to support her habit. And she worked also, but she used to boost. So we would have a whole bunch of the same coats laying around, and it was a leather coat. I remember I put it on, and I found like 5 or 6 bundles of heroin in the pocket. And I didn't know what it was. So the first thing, you know, I used to watch movies where they're tasting shit. That's the first thing I did. I opened one up and taste it, and it didn't, I don't know what the fuck I was expecting to taste, but I know that's what they did in the movie. So I said, let me try this shit. I tasted it, and I didn't feel high. I didn't feel my tongue numb, nothing. It just was nasty. And I was like, and I looked at the bag, and there was nothing, you know, it was just a little bit of dust, the powder in there. So I was like, what the fuck is this? I thought they were empty, you know, I didn't know what it was. And then I took it to somebody who knew what it was. And he was like, yo, where you get this? And I was like, I remember I said my aunt gave it to me before she went. I said my aunt was going into a rehab, so she gave it to me and told me to make some money. And he's like, all right. So we went and sold that stuff, and I made like maybe like $500 or $600. I made it like that. So I was like, damn. And then it came the time when my mom found out that I sold her drugs. So I thought she was gonna be up. She's like, yo, she said, you found something in my coat, like the day later. I said, no, I don't know what you mean. She's like, look, I already know you found it. I already know you took it to such and such, and you sold it to such and such and such and such. She said, I already know what's up, you know, and I'm just saying such and such to keep names out of it. And I still denied it. I was like, no. And her response was, she's like, it's my fault. I shouldn't have had it in that coat for you to find. So I think she felt guilty, you know, because that could have been a whole different situation. I could have been curious and tried the drugs. Or the person I took it to could have been curious and tried the drugs. Or somebody could have robbed me for them. I could have went to jail. You know, it could have went completely different way. So I think she was like sad and felt like she failed me. You know what I mean? Like something like that. That's what her reaction was.
What about first time, since you did that? When was the first time you used drugs? What was it?
The first time I used drugs, I smoked a joint. No, I drank alcohol when I was a kid, matter of fact. But I drank to get drunk because my sister was babysitting me, and we was hanging out with all her friends. Me and my older sister were like 7 years apart. 6, 7 years apart. So we was hanging out with all her friends. She was with her boyfriend. I was in a park with all the older guys. And mind you, I was, you know, there's a big difference from a 8-year-old to a 15, 16-year-old. So they're all drinking, and I started drinking like a motherfucker too. I remember being drunk. My sister smelled my breath and slapped the shit out of me.
Where you at, in Pennsylvania?
Yeah. Yep. I was in an Acres playground drinking. Yeah. And then the first time I smoked weed, I was same thing.
15. I was 15. Yo.
Yeah, I was young. I was probably like 12 years old, maybe.
With Joey.
Yeah. I was probably like 12 years old. I smoked a joint. It was like New Year's Day or something, I believe. And I smoked a joint, and I don't really remember it get me high or anything like that. I don't remember, you know, I don't remember it not getting me high either. I just remember smoking at a young age.
So you went to fucking middle school. You did all middle school out here.
Yeah. Yep.
And then fucking high school. How many years of high school you did out in Chikalami?
I got locked up. I was in the 9th grade.
9th grade?
Yeah. I went to prison. I was in the 9th grade. And
so middle school. So hold on, middle school. How was middle school?
Middle school it was all right. My mom,
suspended,
I used to get suspended on a regular basis.
Fights a little bit.
Yeah, all that type of stuff. I used to get in trouble.
How was the childhood around that time?
It was all right because my mother met my younger sister's father, and he didn't get high at first or anything like that. He was a hard worker. He taught me what it was to be a man, you know, so I had a father figure in the house. So it was my childhood was good when he came in the picture.
Yeah.
You know, Christmas was good. I remember all the bills were paid. We had food in the refrigerator. He never put his hands on my mom. They used to argue normal stuff, but he never put his hands on my mom, never put his hands on me. Because I remember when my dad left my mom, he took everything in the house. Everything. He took all our bedroom furniture. We had nothing left in the house. We were sleeping on the floor. I don't even know if we had a mattress in the house. For some reason, my dad took everything in the house. And there was nothing. There was times where we didn't have food. Where I remember I came out of the kitchen one time with a bowl full of grape jelly. And my mom was like, what the fuck are you doing? She's like, that's cavities right there. But there wasn't nothing to eat in the house. And I was starving. You know, and that's just the way it was. I remember we didn't have fucking hot water in the house, you know, where we'd take a shower. We used to have to go to a friend's house or boil water to take a shower in the house, you know, take a bath. Or we didn't have no heat, where we used to have to open up the oven and turn on the stove to get heat in the house. You know, so that was what it was like before
Paul came in the picture.
Yeah, his name is Paul. Before he came in the picture. Yep. And
so even though the house was stable and life was stable, you were still getting bad.
I was still getting in trouble.
That's when you started.
Yes, that's
really
when I started
like
venturing off.
The fuck in.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, because I was, you know what it was? I think I was also insecure of myself and all the shit that I had went through. I remember being young and I would have like reoccurring nightmares of just chaos. It would be like a snowball going down a hill and getting bigger, but all you would hear was screaming. And I used to wake up and my fucking heart would be beating and I'd be crying. And it was, I think everything that was just growing on in my childhood was starting to sort of come out in me. And I always had a bad attitude, you know what I mean? And I always used to think that I was the toughest person in the world and all that type of shit as a kid. But I think it was because I was so insecure with myself. You know, and I used to act like that to keep people away from me. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So that's the second part of your childhood. What's your favorite part of that second part of the childhood? Because when you were in 9th grade, I mean, even though you're still a kid,
yeah, it's different.
You're gonna know you're an adult.
Yeah,
you're doing a crime that made you certified an adult. So that's gonna be your adult life.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like your only childhood then in the 8th grade, where it's kind
of. My favorite childhood memories at that time was honestly like my birthdays and stuff with my stepfather, with Paul. He would spoil us. So on the birthdays we'd get. I remember one time he got me a big ass hot air balloon. And then, you know, the little basket, it was filled with money in there, like a whole bunch of dollar bills crumpled up. And it was only like $30 or something, but it felt
like a lot.
I was like, damn, I was so happy. And it was like a surprise birthday, because before that, you know, we would have like birthday parties, but it wasn't nothing special. You know, it wasn't like a birthday party for real, I don't really think. So that's when I started remembering like having birthday parties and having Christmas and all that stuff. And it was dope. I used to love that. Yeah, so that was probably like, those are some of my best memories as, middle school, as like a preteen, a teenager, stuff like that.
Around that time, who did you look up to? Like, who were people that you looked up to, whether they were negative or positive? Like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, like.
I don't know. I guess I could say I looked up to Paul, my stepfather.
Yeah.
I also looked up to, matter of fact, my uncle. I looked up to him. He was married to my aunt. His name is Will. He was like a father figure to me. He used to, like teach me to box when I was younger. I used to spend a lot of time with him. He taught me about working out and stuff like that. And I used to look up to him. He's somebody I could say I looked up to. He was a father figure at a young age, that I looked up to. But for me, I don't think I had like people that I really looked up to when I was young. Like Michael Jordan, for real. You know what I mean? Like athletes, stuff like that, maybe. But I remember at a young age, I looked up to like Malcolm X. I looked up to Martin Luther King, like people like that at a very, very young age. I looked up to them when I didn't even know who they were, but I just knew they were somebody special. I looked up to those type of people.
Do you want to start getting into?
No, we'll cut this here, and then the next video, we'll pick up where we left off. We'll start getting into a little bit more of the middle school years and stuff like that, because that's where stuff starts to pick up and my life starts to change. I started making changes in my life that eventually led the road to where I went. So I thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget, hit the comments and let me know if there's anything else you would like me to touch on that maybe I didn't touch on in this video that you would like to ask.
Yeah, some extra questions.
Yep, and stuff for my middle school years. All right, so thank you very much. I appreciate y'all. Hit that comment, subscribe, like. Listen, I look at my numbers, and the majority of the people that watch my video aren't subscribed. So hit that subscribe button, please. That's how the channel grows. I thank you guys. God bless, and pick up where we left off in the next day or two.